our Facebook Live. We did have a hiatus pretty much for the month of July due to the holiday of the 4th of July. So hopefully everybody was healthy during that time frame and got to spend additional quality time with your family and friends. And this is a point of information just to keep everybody apprised of what we're facing with the coronavirus. That was the start of the Facebook Live initiative. But as we move along, we are seeing the value of it to keep our community engaged on different fronts. But with the relaunch, we will touch on, focus on the coronavirus because we are seeing peaking here with regards to Springfield, Sangamon County specifically, and our public health department, which is handled through Sangamon County Public Health. And with us today is Fire Chief Alan Reyne and Police Chief Kenny Winslow. And actually, I think they were the first ones that were part of Facebook Live and received the highest attendance until I think it was maybe Alderman Gregory's portion with Alderman Proctor. That might have been the one that overtook you guys. But it did take, you were standing tall for numerous weeks on end. But your popularity grows because of, the impact it has, the coronavirus, the impact on us, on your departments. But as we move forward, the importance of first responders in all our lives, I think that through this whole pandemic, through the civil unrest, through just the, the nature that we're living in today's society, I think it's really incumbent upon all of us to really realize what great assets we have in Springfield, especially with, I'll start off with our fire department. Springfield Fire Department is a Class 1 rated agency. There's only 3%, I believe, in the country that received that designation. And with that is, Chief Reyne represents the fire department in that, receiving that accommodation. But one thing we did have, and I'll ask them to speak first, but then we'll cover the executive order that I presented on Friday. But Chief, if you would give us an update with regards to the fire department, what you've experienced over the past few months, and if you'd want to bring us up to speed on the positive cases or anything you'd want to share with us, because the Chief Reyne is our representative for the incident command team that is assimilated by the county and kind of our conduit with regards to smooth operations with the whole process and how we're working with the medical community, with the healthcare community, and as a city government trying to make the best of a bad situation that we're all in. So Chief Reyne, if you could take it from there and share with us your insights, we'd appreciate it.
Well, the Springfield Fire Department continues to respond to everyone's emergency. We've been really lucky. We have had people quarantined, but we have not had anybody test positive yet. I believe we've gotten everybody through the testing process at least once. So when we're dispatched, sometimes they're going to ask you additional questions on the phone through dispatch, and that will give our members better information as they respond. And it's really similar to what you're going through now when you go into maybe some appointment with like a dentist office or eye doctor or something like that. It's just additional screening to keep people safe and to find out who does and who may not have any symptoms. So, initially our concern, probably the last time we were on this Facebook Live, was the PPE, and we have received quite a bit of that. There are still things that are on back order that are a little harder to get to. And again, this is a little different than most, most crisis in an area, because this is nationwide and really worldwide. So you have a lot of similar interest in the same type of PPE and things that we're trying to get to keep our people and the public safe, because we know that as we our exposure risk is greater than most people, so we're taking steps to curb that and to keep our people safe. Your firefighters are doing a really good job. They very cooperative, very understanding of the situation that we're in. And so, I commend them for just doing what they've always done, really, and that's being there for your emergency. As far as the numbers this week, really the last 3 weeks, we've seen what I would call a drastic increase. The good news is, as you've probably heard, some people will say, well, when you do more testing, there's certainly going to be more positives. There's no doubt that that's the case, and that has certainly driven up the positives in the county. But when you look at the percentage of positives, so the percentage of those who are tested, who are positive, you're seeing really a small, below 5%, up till now, has been in our county, at least when we've been put into the regions that the governor put us into about a month ago. So from that aspect, while the numbers are increasing, the percentages are still manageable. What worries me is when you see the demographics of the people that are positive. A lot of them are younger than 40 right now. So you see 40s, 30s, 20s, teens, and then kids, which, you know, from the beginning, that was never, and nobody wants this, so I'm trying to choose my words carefully, but that really wasn't the population of people that we're worried about. We were always worried about people with more medical issues, older populations getting it. My worry is that now that you see the 20s, 30s, 40s, is who are they going to give that to in the coming weeks? And I worry that we're going to start seeing the older population becoming more infected. And that obviously is the worst case scenario. It's the hardest to manage. And it's just like anything else, you know, the older you get or the more illnesses you have already, the more you don't want to add another one on top of that. So if you're diabetic, if you've got, you know, if you're prone to other heart, lung disease, you certainly don't want to compound that with COVID. And that's been our message. Our message from the beginning has been one of concern and hopefully education, but not panic. We've tried to let people know that this virus is real, that you can take steps to cut down a large percentage of your exposure. You can't do anything that will keep you 100% safe unless you're able to just completely isolate from people. But when you talk to some of the people that are positive, I had a conversation with one the other day, and you know, she said that she has been very careful and she has taken the advice and taken the steps and still wound up getting it. Luckily, she's young and she's not really in the demographic that we're worried about. And she said for her, it's been like a really bad cold. She just feels fatigued after doing simple tasks, but she's getting better. And in fact, I think she's out of COVID jail in the next couple of days. So glad to see that she's recovered. And that's what we hope for everybody is, you know, that we're just wanting to give people the information, hope that they take the good advice that your medical professionals are giving us, and just, you know, heed the warning. It's not a hoax. It's not a joke. I haven't talked to anybody who's had it that was happy that they had it. And even though most are going to recover and be fine, it's still a very serious illness when you get it.
Yeah, that's a good overview. It does impact people differently. Like you said, some don't have as severe illnesses as others, but it just depends on what your underlying conditions are. And well, really, you just don't know. There have been healthy individuals that meet with the tragic consequences of COVID. So that's the cautionary tale and the importance of wearing our face coverings, washing our hands as much as possible, and keeping our social distance. And the reason we keep reiterating it is because those are the only items of proven factors to mitigate the coronavirus. Until we have a vaccination in place, then, you know, that's the best way we can help protect others, so we don't have to make that, hopefully, the trip to the hospital to our medical professionals. The one thing I will ask you real quick, Chief, two questions. One is on the region, the new region, and just so people have an understanding, how many counties does that cover? And is that the same region as the public health departments were drawn into before the pandemic? You know, through the Illinois Department of Public Health, they have their own regions. Is it mirror those regions? And then also, how many counties does that cover?
So you're going to ask me a question I can't answer right off the top of my head, but I'm looking at the map, so it looks like it's about nine or 10 counties. I would say that they were very similar to our EMS regions, which the fire department is familiar with. Okay. And that probably does mirror the public health regions that you're referring to.
Yeah, as you can see, we just go, we go with the flow on this Facebook Live. The other question I do have, and I've heard this comment with the young people being infected. Some people actually said, well, it's run its course through the older population. Now it's just hitting the younger population because they weren't exposed. What's your comment to that?
Yeah, I have not seen any proof of that. I haven't. If you look at our numbers just as the county, I mean, the vast majority of people were never tested positive for COVID. So, yeah, there might be some that, when the antibody tests come along, there might be some that are able to show that maybe they did have it. Maybe they were just fatigued for a couple of days, and that's good, but what they don't know is, they don't know that you can't get it again. I mean, you can get the flu over and over again. Normally, you won't get it in the same season over and over again. But there's a lot of things that they still don't know about this virus, and that's been the frustrating part of, it's really hard. It's really hard, and I understand. I talk to a lot of people out in the public, and they always say the same thing: is well, we've gotten mixed messages, and the science has changed. Well, that is true. There's absolutely no doubt about that. The messages have been mixed, but it's like anything else. If you learn more about something and you're trying to get that information out in front of people, it may conflict with something you said earlier when you were more ignorant of how the virus worked or how it spread. And, I know the one is on surfaces. I've read a few things where it's just not as bad as we originally thought on surfaces. But, that doesn't make any sense to me when you see people that live in the same building that have no contact with each other than the fact that they take the same elevator bank. So, it is tough. It's tough to give somebody, there's no magic bullet. There's no one answer. The only thing that I can say is, I always tell for firefighters, we stay in our lane, and part of that is listening to people that know there are experts in viruses and how they spread, and it's up to us to listen to them and to trust their expertise, just as we want people to do with our individual expertise. I would never, Chief Winslow, I would never tell him how to run a police department, because I have no idea how to run a police department. That's not our lane. And I can read opinions on Facebook or anything else about how to do it, but they're the experts, and that's who we need to listen to. And this is no different with the epidemiologist.
Well, thanks, Chief. Appreciate it. And we'll start discussing after I do the intro for Chief Winslow, the executive order and how we're partnering together with other entities. But it gives me great pride to reintroduce Chief Winslow. He has the tough task of overseeing our police department. As many of us know, they're called to a situation that's not pleasant. It's usually an emergency situation that none of us want to be in. And they've really had a tough task at hand. When we started with the coronavirus, it's about how do we keep our public safe from an illness, as well as our officers and all our employees. But as we migrated through that, we had the civil unrest. Fortunately, with our community, I think our greatest asset, it is our people. And it's due to the great work of Chief Winslow and the police department engaging the public, as well as many others. But that community level of trust really proven paid off in great dividends during the situation that we're in that none of us could have foreseen. But it just didn't start during the pandemic. This started years previously. It's a lot of interaction by council members, by ourselves as city leaders, and our general public. And that's what we need to continue to do, is support one another through this pandemic, and support one another as much as possible. But Chief Winslow's been up to the task, and I couldn't be prouder of our police department and Chief Winslow and the great job they've done through this whole pandemic. So with that, Chief, if you give us an overview of, kind of what your thoughts are, where we were, where we are now, and we'll touch on the executive order after you make your intro comments.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and thanks everybody for having us today. The last few months obviously have been challenging, from the advent of COVID to keeping our officers safe, and how we've had to change our operations and implement those changes to keep the public safe as well. People who know that call the police, sometimes we're not responding. We're taking things over the phone. We're taking things via online, just working through some of those processes. to ensure that we keep people safe. A lot of times officers are calling the complainant back, getting as much information on the phone. That way they can limit the time that they have out of their car in the presence of somebody while still trying to maintain social distance. In our field, unfortunately, you can't always maintain that social distance. There's times when you do have to go hands-on or you have to be in close proximity for various reasons, and it just doesn't work. And we saw that challenge through numerous events in our community over the last few months, whether it was the civil unrest that you spoke about, or the block parties that we had, or just our normal calls for service, responding to accidents and providing, emergency life-saving procedures. So there's always that risk when being a police officer. Our officers do have the appropriate PPE, but again, it's one of those things that there's still that risk there. Simple things from like going in and doing compliance checks in bars, that presents a risk. Even though we wear the appropriate PPE going in, we're going into that very same large crowd that we've been trying to discourage. Same thing with the block parties, same thing with the protests, and just our normal calls for service. So it has been challenging, and we're not unlike our community. We have had people who have been affected by COVID. We've had several people who've been off for various reasons, whether it's quarantine or waiting test results, et cetera. So it has affected our operations, but we continue to implement some of those changes. When phase 4 came around, we did roll back some things, but it looks like we may be going back and reinstituting those as we move forward if things don't improve. I think I have the same concerns that everybody else does, is about how do we do our job as safely as possible, not only for our officers, but also for the community. So those are the things that we are looking at as we go forward. Those challenges there that we've had, the job doesn't stop just because of COVID. We saw that, unfortunately, with probably one of the worst tragedies in our history of our community out at Bunn. And again, the job doesn't stop just because there's a pandemic going on. We have to learn to work through that, and that's what our men and women are doing. I'm extremely proud of them.
Yeah, that's appreciate you bringing up that tragedy at Bunn. It's important that the pandemic's taken its toll, but the day-to-day life and the horrific shootings out there, it's just has a toll to a different level. And it's just, our hearts go out to the families that were impacted by it, to the workers, because, during the pandemic, and if you could speak to this, during a pandemic, you're trying to keep social distance, things of this nature. And then this, something of this magnitude happens. And I don't know how the, officers feel with regards to that, but they've had some real challenging times. And, I'm just going to lay it all on the table, how, what they deal with day in and day out. I was asked in an interview, public health inspectors went out to a restaurant or a bar, and they issued a citation. Well, they were harassed. And the interviewer asked, what should happen in that situation? I said, well, that's what the police deal with each and every day when they go out. They don't know what type of situation they're going into. And we had an actual officer being shot at recently. By the grace of God, he was able to react quickly on that. We had a situation where an officer was able to get a person that was running with a weapon to drop their weapon. And, it's not like the consequences that happened in Atlanta. That's due to the training and of the police department. And if you could speak to that, and, kind of to that effect, on the police officers on a daily basis, we'd appreciate you shedding some insight into that.
Yeah. Start with, like I said, when it comes to the pandemic and COVID, it affects each and every one of us. We are just like the rest of the community. We're a part of the community. We have those same concerns about bringing this disease home to our families. We have the same concerns about daycare, about how we get through this as school comes up. And it takes an emotional toll and a psychological toll on our officers as well, as we are out there trying to maintain that social distance and limit interactions to as best as we can. We're still trying to do our job out there. It's tough out there, and some of the things that we've seen out there, it has been a challenging summer so far with shootings, with homicides, with just the type of calls where we can't maintain that social distancing. And that's not good for the public. That's not good for us. Even though we are wearing PPE, it just doesn't, it's not good for all of us. When you talk about the Bunn situation, particularly on one hand, we are so fortunate to have a resource-rich community when it comes to these types of situations, that there was over, an excess of 100 officers in a matter of minutes out there. But that initial response in this type of situation, officers aren't wearing PPE. They're running up there, doing what they have to do first, trying to save lives and trying to eliminate the threat. and see exactly what we have. And they're not taking time to don and doff PPE as they're going in there. They're just going in. And again, that's just one of those things that you have to weigh the consequences there and the risk there. And obviously, getting in and trying to render that aid and, eliminate the threat was more important. But those are just some of the challenges that we face day in and day out. And law enforcement around our country do this every day. And it's a challenge, and these are challenging times for law enforcement. And some of the things that we've seen unfold across our country with the results of what happened, with Mr. Floyd in Minneapolis, the tragedy that occurred up there that I've never heard any law enforcement professional say was justified or warranted. I think we can all agree that it wasn't. But again, it's about, the training that we put on. We are one of the best trained departments in the state, in the country. We constantly train. We go above and beyond what the state mandates are. We do train in de-escalation. A lot of these reforms that people are talking about, the Springfield Police Department has already adopted. We've had them for several years. We haven't allowed chokeholds or taught on vascular neck restraints. In my entire career here in 26 years, that's never been something, unless it was a deadly force encounter, that could be used. A lot of stuff about intervening, we've already had that kind of stuff. So I think we're there. Obviously, we do know that there'll be some changes forthcoming at the state level, and we do believe the national level, but I believe that it's not going to have a huge impact on the Springfield Police Department because we already do most of that. One of the things that people keep talking about is the movement of the 8 can't wait. We think we already meet all 8 of those suggestions. So again, it's about what can we do to do better. We have went back and we have went over our policies and procedures over the last month and a half, looking about what we can do better. And there are some suggestions that we've taken for some community groups, and we've inserted those in our policies and procedures to strengthen what we were already doing. So again, I think we're up for the challenges that are presented to us, but it has been challenging. You talk about the risk and the dangers, and you talk about in a 3-month window with the protests, the block parties, the gun incident, and then shooting at an officer that by the luck of God is still alive and wasn't struck. Those are challenges that no chief wants to go through, but those are challenges that I believe, due to our training and due to the quality of our men and women, we were able to get through, and we're able to learn from each of those incidents so we can strive to do better.
Yeah, well said. So it doesn't matter if it's pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, or post-pandemic. We can't thank our police and firefighters enough for putting their lives on the line each and every day to keep us all safe. We really appreciate all that you do. And then one way you can always, and I think the Chief Winslow did hit on this, we're always looking at how do we improve our processes, or how do we improve the way we serve the public. And so during this Facebook Live, you can post it to comments. You can ask your questions or make comments. So feel free to do so. But even outside Facebook Live, you always can send in an email, feedback at springfield.il.us, and share your insights. We always, we accept criticism. We like constructive criticism, so we can, improve things and move forward in a positive manner to better serve you. But the one thing right now that we are in phase 4, we've been in phase 4 for, I think, since the end of June. And that really welcomed the opening of the bars inside and the restaurants and outside gatherings, so we could gather in a greater capacity. And that leads me to the executive order that was just issued this past Friday. The executive order that I issued was pertaining to bars and restaurants, because what we've seen is, as Chief Reyne had pointed out, the younger population is now getting more infected. And what we're experiencing or being told is a lot of that is being traced back to bars specifically, or possibly restaurants. So the one aspect, and I think it's been shared by everybody, is the frustration on not having a consistent process. I share in that, we all share in that, and that's what we're trying to do. And when I did talk to both chiefs, I asked how hard was it to enforce the open capacity area, because if you go into a bar and you have an open space, or in a beer garden, you have an open space, you can have at least 25% capacity, the way phase 4 was written by the state. And with that, that's hard to enforce. It's tough to engage what the capacity level is. So I always thought that that was kind of a influx number, and I was kind of bothered by it because of, with open spaces, it invites commingling. And if 3 of us, we know each other, we may go to a place together, but if I have the infection, I can give it to both Chief Reyne and Chief Winslow, and and then they take it home to others. And so even though we do venture out, we're friends, we still keep our social distance at work. We wear our face coverings when we're in the same proximity, and just to keep each other healthy as much as possible and mitigate the spread as much as possible. So with the executive order, it does touch on 4 things, and it is geared towards business owners because they can control their own environment, keeping their employees safe, keeping their customers safe, and providing the services they want to. And when I go into a restaurant or a bar or what have you, there is a uneasy feeling when you do go into it and the servers aren't wearing face coverings, things of that nature. So we want to make sure everybody can have that enjoyable experience, support the local economy as much as possible, and then promote that so people do feel, more people will probably feel more comfortable in going out. So the 4 points that we really touch on, one is with regards to signs. You've seen signs in usually stores or other places. It says no shirt, no shoes, no service. This is pretty simple. No shirt, no shoes, no mask, no service. Because, I'd like to ask the people that say, I'm not going to wear a mask in close proximity of others. Do you actually go into a store with no shirt on or no shoes on? I don't think so. And it's a small inconvenience to ask everybody to do their due diligence, because it does help keep a healthier environment, even personally or from, if you're eating food or things of that nature. And that's what we're talking about. So that's one thing when we do go out and visit the bars or restaurants, and both chiefs will weigh in on this, to make sure the signs are posted, and you can download them at our website at springfield.il.us. There's a COVID page where you can download signs, or you can go to the CDC site. There's plenty of sample signage out there with regards to the mask requirement. The other thing is when the officers or the inspectors go in, making sure employees are wearing face coverings. And so the face coverings can't be like this. They can't be like this. They're supposed to be worn over your nose and mouth. And so you cover all your droplets that could come out or what have you. And when you're serving food or a beverage, it's important because those droplets could go into those items and then infect the people you're serving. So all servers, all employees of the establishment should wear their masks properly with regards to that. And then, so that's the other checkpoint. The third is, of course, with the spacing of the tables and chairs, especially tables are 6 feet apart. With chairs, if they're at a bar, 6 feet between groupings. So if I go in to a bar with my wife or someone I know, we can be together, but anybody that's not in my party should be 6 feet distance from us. So that's the spacing that they'll check for. The other thing is to make sure everybody has a standing, if there's a high top in the bar or restaurant, standing there or have a place to sit at. There shouldn't be any congregation in open space areas. So we've eliminated that 25% capacity at a beer garden or open space. You can be in there if there's tables and seats there. And so, and socially distanced apart to 6 feet. So those are the 4 items. With regards to patrons, when you go in, you should wear your face covering properly, go sit down, order your food, or beverage, or what have you. And then when you go up to the bar, or go into the restaurant, or or to the restroom, or you're leaving, you should put your face covering back on. And that way you protect each and every person in there, and and you have a pleasant visit, as we hope that we mitigate the escalation that we've seen, because we've seen restaurants, we've seen bars have people that are affected, and we have owners, on the verge of tears that they have to quarantine for a certain amount of time, close down for a certain period of time, and that's what we're trying to prevent. We want to stay in phase 4. We want to support the restaurants and bars as much as possible and move in that direction. So we've been in this mode of education for a period of time. The more recent executive orders have been since Friday, where we've been trying to get the word out, educating the bar owners and restaurants as much as possible. But this weekend, both the fire department and the police department, they'll pair up and actually make visits and start writing citations to people that aren't in compliance. So first, I'd kick it to Chief Reyne, if you'd want to give an overview with public health and how they're going to participate in the sheriff's department, because this is just Springfield. We do have pockets of Springfield or within the county we don't cover. And so how we're trying to get this message across from a unified approach, and that Chief Winslow can talk about, the visits that we'll be making this weekend.
So, yeah,
Chief Reyne?
one thing I'm glad you covered, because I hear people also when I'm out, and it just, the one thing that I have to tell people consistently over and over again is that our goal is for businesses to stay open. We are not out there trying to do anything that is disrupting business, that is the back into phase 3. That's our biggest fear internally. The three of us have had those conversations, is we don't want to go backwards. We want to stay in phase 4, but the only way we're going to stay in phase 4 is if we are doing those things to not spike our numbers. We're already in a warning area. Luckily, we're kind of at the bottom of that with our cases per 100,000, and we don't want to see that go up. So that's why we are reaching out to the business community, and for the most part, we have had great compliance. We do get complaints. We get a lot of complaints. We get complaints about, sometimes I'm not even sure people are actually in the business. They just see what the parking lot looks like and infer that there's overcrowding. But some of the complaints have been legitimate, and some of them have been just blatant non-compliance, and that's what we want to avoid, because it seems like when you put all of those people, especially into a bar or a restaurant, where they don't have accountability for that space, it's very difficult. When the governor, and they've since changed this at the state, when the governor first said 50% capacity, everybody immediately assumed that meant, or just assumed that meant fire load capacity. Well, the problem with that is fire load capacity can mean two different things. You can have two rooms that are the exact same size. If one's got sprinklers and the other one's got exits, they can have more people in there. That has nothing to do with social distance. It's just, can we, if this place catches on fire, can we get people out of this safely, out of this area in an orderly fashion? So that was the first problem we had. The second problem we had was the standing areas of 25%. So if you think of your favorite bar or restaurant, and maybe you have a dining room and then a short wall, and then you have a bar, we don't, when we go in there as a fire department, to tell them initially when the place is built or when they first start operating that business, we don't tell them you can have X number of people in the bar and X number of people in the restaurant. Building capacity is just building capacity, as long as you can get people out. So if somebody were to call us and say, well, my bar, what's 25% capacity? That was very difficult. So when Illinois took away the 50% capacity, which I thought was a smart idea, which were emails that I had sent trying to hopefully make that happen, I thought it was smart because it's all about spacing. So if you've got if you can put a lot more people into Washington Park than you can onto the Y block, than you can into a beer garden. So it can't just be a number. It can't just be 50, because we don't know where those lines start and end. But more importantly, can everybody be there safely spaced apart? So if we go into a restaurant and we can help them put those tables 6 feet apart, no more than 10 of each table, then we know how many people we can put in there, as long as everybody has a chair or a place to sit. So when the mayor's executive order first came out, there was a little bit of confusion on that we were worried about people walking up to the bar to get a beverage, or walking to the restroom, or walking outside to smoke. We're not. We want you to have a mask on. We're clear about that. We want you to have a mask on. But more importantly, when we go into those establishments, it's very difficult for us to gauge how many people can be in there, and then to account for that. So on that, the city and the county are beginning to, we've had meetings this week, and we've worked together throughout this whole process, but this enforcement part of it is somewhat new. This has only been the last couple of weeks that we've changed our model on that. So we want to make sure that we're speaking with one voice, and the mayor, and Brian McFadden from the county, and Gail O'Neill, everybody wants to speak with one voice, to be consistent, because one of the things that when the city took the bold step of stopping smoking in the bars, well, people could go 5 feet outside of the city and smoke in those bars, and then ultimately the state caught up where everybody's under the same rules. And that's kind of what we're wanting to do at the county level, at least from an enforcement angle. So the county, you know, they do issue food licenses to restaurants. The city is more liquor license to the bars and certain restaurants. But that's the enforcement power that we have. And you know, I've talked to bartenders that have said, you know, hey, we're trying to do the right thing. It's our patrons that are coming in that are chastising us for wearing masks. It's owners who are saying, you know, don't wear masks because you're freaking the public out, you know, and those are hard conversations to have with those people. That bartender's just trying to feed her kids. That's all she's trying to do. And it's not fair. It's not being a good neighbor to go in there and chastise them for you know, doing the right thing, for being concerned for her own family and for the safety of her patrons, and complying with an executive order that could get their business fined or you know, ultimately more draconian measures such as taking away the liquor license. And we don't want that. We just want compliance. That's it. We just want people to do the right thing. That doesn't mean, you know, we're not going to jump out from behind the curtain and try and catch you. We want you to comply. We want to make sure that you understand what the rules are and that you comply with those so that we keep everybody safe.
Yeah, that's a good point, because really, to reemphasize, we don't want to go back to phase 3. One of the metrics that will send us back to phase 3 is the positive number of cases being treated per 100,000. And we've hit the record of 70. And that was pretty alarming because the metric should be 50. And so we're well above that. And so we're trying to ratchet that number down. And we believe by this proactive measure, re-educating people the importance of the initiative, wearing masks, keeping socially distant, being cognizant of that, I think this will help. But Chief Winslow, if you'd talk to us about the enforcement aspect that will take place this weekend, and anything else you'd like to share with regards to educating the public and keeping everybody as safe as possible and compliant so we can stay in phase 4.
Yes, sir. Well, right now what we've been doing, we've been responding to complaints just as the fire department inspectors have. And this will be a compliance check, a proactive check. We'll be checking business throughout the entire community, starting with restaurants and bars, and then moving more to the bars in the later night hours. Obviously, doesn't mean we won't pop in earlier in the daytime too to check on something, but that's kind of what we're looking at. We know that the crowds for the bars are typically at night from the complaints we've been getting, so we'll be out there late at night, early morning hours. And again, you know, our goal there would be hopefully to see everybody in compliance, but if they're not, we will be meeting with the manager and educating them on what the guidelines are, kind of like we did this weekend, give them a copy of what the new guidelines are. And then basically we will cite them, you know, for a violation of the emergency order. And with that said, it's a fine up to $500. So it does have a stiff penalty. That's not our goal there. We would treat them a lot like we do with the tobacco compliance checks as well as our alcohol compliance checks. We would target those that we had complaints on first, but then the rest will be random. And so again, we will hit all parts of the city. Again, we hope that everybody's in compliance. That's why we've been out on this media campaign this week, trying to educate people. That's why we started going to bars and restaurants last weekend, sending officers in proactively to educate them on the new guidelines. Because as you said, it's all about keeping people safe and trying to stay in phase 4. And that's really what we want to do. We're not going to come in and try to be sneaky about it. You know, we're just going to come straight in. And again, if we see a violation, come up to the manager and we'll explain why we're there and what the violations are. Or again, just to thank them for, hey, it appears everything's good here and you're in compliance, and that's what we want. So those that are non-compliant will probably be back within 24 hours to check again to make sure you are now in compliance. And if not, you know, obviously then we'll prepare the appropriate documentation to send to the Liquor Commission, which is yourself, and you can decide how you want to handle that going forward after that. But again, I don't anticipate a lot of citations. I don't anticipate a lot of violations. I think a lot of things, like Al said, is that a lot of people are trying to comply. They're trying to do the right thing. I go into a business every day, and if not more than one every day. And typically when I'm in there, I will see somebody without a mask on, etc. You know, and if I'm in uniform, I always stop and educate them that basically that the governor's rule says you must have a mask anytime you enter an indoor public place. So most of the time people will acknowledge that and they'll go out and put their mask on. They just forgot. It's that muscle memory, remembering to put it on. I know it's new, but again, we have to get that way. We have to get that way for, as Al said, to be good examples, good role models for the rest of the community, but as well as for our children as they go back to school, teaching them and getting them a company or getting them used to wearing masks as well. It can protect all of us, and we just all have to do our part here.
Yeah, you touch on actually a point that one of the Facebookers had sent in. It says, so how do you plan to deal with retailers who have not compliant consumers, such as Walmart? So can you touch on that, both chiefs, if you would, please? And if Chief Winslow ever says Al, he's talking about Chief Reyne. That's his first name for those that you might not have known.
Yeah, we've met. Mayor, I was laughing at when you showing people how to put their mask on. Everybody wearing their mask.
That's right.
I heard a word the other day I hadn't heard in a long time, and I was in a retail store, and some older gentleman called some young kid a nincompoop. So, because he wasn't wearing his mask properly, he had it down here on his chin. So, boy, there's one for the archives. I hadn't heard that one in a while. And that's, honestly, it can't be us against them. It can't be, the police and fire department against the world. It has to come from good education and good compliance. We know there's going to be bad actors. The police department will tell you they don't like you breaking into people's cars, but there's still going to be people that break into cars. So you've always got people that we need through good education and just hopefully people heeding the advice and then seeing the numbers going up. I can tell you, I think that's had an effect. Just my own personal experience going into grocery stores and things like that, it does seem like people are more compliant. And I can tell you the lines at the testing facilities are around the corner usually. So that's good. I mean, I don't really, I hopefully people have a lot of confidence when they go there that they've taken the steps, that they haven't been exposed. It's one of those that we have to have cooperation in order for this to work. And we're trying to provide the right information. We're trying to give good guidance without panicking people. And that's what we will do during any crises, during any city crisis that we could be in. That's what we as city leaders do, is give people the information and the advice. If there's been a tornado, we want you to do this. If there's been an explosion, we want you to do this. And we need people to, again, listen to those experts. And even if we're not the experts, we are certainly filtering that information to the public, hopefully with 3 people and then other city directors that are not on this group, with people that are the public trust, as you try to build that trust over years. And then in times like this, you really are hoping that people just simply trust that you're giving them good advice.
Just to add on what
Go ahead.
Just to add on what Chief Reyne said, we can't be everywhere. It's kind of like the speeder goes down the street. You stop one and they go, well, there was 10 others in front of me. Why didn't you stop them? We would love to be able to police every retail establishment in town and have the manpower to do it. We just don't have to do it. There has to be some responsibility upon the business owners. And that goes back to what you said earlier, and the fact that no shirts, no shoes, no service. Walmart does not have to allow people to shop at their store. Quick and Easy does not have to allow people to come to their gas station, and various other businesses. So I'm glad to see that Walmart, Target, and some of your big box stores are now taking that nationwide policy that everybody must wear a mask when they come in there. The issue is when they come in, they take it down or they take it off, or there are some, exceptions in the rules for those who have medical needs. So there's no requirement to provide proof that you have a medical condition not to wear that. So again, what we have to ask people, self-responsibility, do the right thing for all of us. And I really do believe that sometimes when people get called out by other people in the public, or whether it's by an officer for not doing it, that they usually comply. They realize that, hey, I better do this, and they go do that. We don't want anybody getting into fights or see some of the things we've seen around the country where it turns into a big disturbance or violent over something like that. But employees and employers have to take some responsibility here and refuse service if they don't comply with it. It's that simple. We can't do it all for everybody. And I had a business owner ask me the other day, well, I don't want my employees confronting people because I'm fearful. Well, then you're basically being laissez-faire and saying do what you want to do. You got to step up and have a backbone, and your employees have to have a right. And if somebody starts to get out of control, that's when you call us and let us handle it from there. But you have to take an action, and that's what we really need to see around here. We need all businesses to be cooperative. We need all employers, managers, supervisors to be able to take that step and say, hey, I don't know if you understand, but in Illinois, this is the rule. In Springfield, this is the rule, and it's posted on the door there. So please comply and please do your part.
And 2 points to that. The reason we started with the bars and restaurants is the governor did allow liquor commissioners, which are mayors, authority to suspend a liquor license if there was a health reason or non-compliance for the pandemic. And so that's why we're able to take this extra measure and really target those particular entities. But as both chiefs said, we will do, visit other ones. With regards to Walmart specifically, we had a situation previously with regards to, at one time it was semi-trucks, how they would park there. They weren't allowed to do that. Well, we ended up having to fine Walmart here locally, and I think they paid over $40,000 in fines. So it may get to that point, but we will have a conversation with Walmart. And what we will try to do is, do these kind of spot check compliance throughout all the different businesses. But as both pointed out, it's difficult to do. It's really important that we all do our part because it is the individual's responsibility if they would do that and wearing their face coverings. And that's what people are complaining about recently with regards to the other establishments. The other one that did come in a note, and this is one of the benefits having Facebook Live, is because I'm not sure the answer to this, but I'm sure Chief Reyne does. He says, have Springfield Fire Department employees been given the power to ticket for fines now? Because I guess before, when we had illegal burning or we have burning violations, they're not allowed to. So can you shed some light on that, Chief Reyne?
Well,
and the fire officials issue citations.
That's a good friend of mine that wrote that question. So I was just going to text him because he's a retired fire captain with the Springfield Fire Department. He's very familiar with our Division II. Did a great job for the city while he was here. And he's correct. We don't have a ticket book. We still don't have a ticket book. We're going to work with officers who do, and basically we're going to work hand in hand with them to issue those citations.
Well, wouldn't it be beneficial if you have inspectors that did have the authority to do that? Because we probably could make that happen.
I think I know a guy that could maybe make that happen. I'm not sure.
Well, we'll check into that. So we appreciate the question. The other thing, I'll throw this one to Chief Winslow, and this has come up at City Council numerous times, and they want to know what can be done for speeding in their neighborhood. And I know, I'm not sure if you were looking into it or someone was looking into, actually other communities, they have, and I know one time we've done this with disability parking, where you had civilians actually write citations. I think we've gotten kind of away from that, but I've known some cities actually had purchased like speed devices, and they allowed residents to become certified to do that. But I don't know if you've looked at that, Chief, or what can you say with speeders, because that is an ongoing problem, especially in the neighborhoods. That's where the concern is, when you might have a child darting out to pick up a ball and you don't want to have that tragic incident happen, and everybody's always concerned about speeding through their neighborhood. So what would you like to say to that?
Well, obviously, if anybody has a complaint, they can send it to our traffic office, or they can even call dispatch, and we get an officer out there, their neighborhood police officer, to address those issues. But what we've done in the past, and kind of like the program you're talking about, is that our NPOs have worked, as well as our traffic officers have worked with the citizens in the area. Typically, they're people that are part of a neighborhood association, and we'll train on how to use a radar. And then basically what they can do is we'll assign them a radar for a week or so. They can sit out there and they can, run radar or clock people from their driveway speeding down their residential street. At that point in time, we ask them to basically get a description of the car as well as the plate number. We'll verify it, and then if they clock somebody that's doing, say, more than 10 miles an hour over, we'll issue them a letter educating them that hey, you're on this date and time, your car was caught speeding in this area. We ask you to please slow down, that kind of thing. They don't issue them citations by law in Illinois. A civilian can't issue a citation for that. We do have what you said, the civilian handicap, volunteer handicap program, where they can issue handicap parking tickets, but not moving violations, and then have to go to court and swear in court what happened there. So again, it's more of an education purpose. And what we find typically in those situations, and usually it's a last resort when we do that, because typically what we'll do is we'll do what they call a stealth speed study. We'll put up a stealth speed board where no one can see it, and we'll get a true reading of what's going down. And what we typically find is everybody's at the speed limit or just barely over, or less than 5 miles an hour over. So you'll have like maybe 1% that are above that. The problem is in residential streets, they're typically narrower, and they appear to be faster. When people don't realize that, if it's not marked as 30 miles an hour, that's quicker than what a lot of people think it is, So what will happen usually is we do these kind of details where we'll give a citizen a radar. They'll realize that it's the same thing that the speed board told us, that the vast majority are not speeding or they're barely over it, and it just appears they're going faster. It's a perception issue. And then it usually turns into, well, can we lower the speed limit, and then we have to work with traffic engineering and the alderman to get that done. But if somebody's interested in something like that, be more than happy to take that on, teach them to do it. Again, it's kind of been an informal process. We've been doing that since I was an NPO 24 years ago. So,
great.
But again,
we'll probably reemphasize that.
It's something we can utilize.
And the other thing we should reemphasize is we do have a question about the Springfield Citizens Review Commission for the police department. If you'd like to speak to that, and then what you've done or what you're in the process of doing with regards to that. And I think you touched on with policies and that, but if you'd like to shed some light. But there is an active one, but we don't have a lot of complaints necessarily that would funnel through to them. But Chief, if you'd like to weigh in on that process.
Yeah, we're one of the few departments across the nation, let alone in the state, that has a police civilian review commission or police citizen review commission. And with that said, basically ours is if a case comes through our internal affairs process and it's not sustained, meaning that somebody wasn't found per se guilty and they weren't issued discipline, then the person can appeal it to the Police Citizen Review Commission for us to reconsider it. They can take a look at it and then we can reconsider it. We don't get too many cases through there. I think we've had maybe 3 in my time as chief. I think that speaks to the fact that usually when something goes through internal affairs with the advent of body cameras, it pretty much shows what occurs. Again, they're not a perfect solution or a panacea, but they show a lot of what happened out there. And I can't tell you how many times a citizen will come in to make a complaint, and the first thing my internal affairs investigators do before we even take the complaint, well, why don't we sit down and just watch the video? And a lot of times the complaint will say, that's not how I recall that. Obviously I was upset at the time. And now that I'm watching exactly what happened, I kind of understand why things unfolded the way they did. And then, also us explaining why we do what we do. And sometimes we're not real good at that. We'd have to try to do better. But that's how the current board is set up. The current board is, it falls under community relations. It does not fall under the police department. They appoint their members. I know that it's a diversified board based on the racial makeup of the community. But again, that's kind of how it works right now. We don't have a lot to go there, due because to the fact I think that we handle our business pretty well.
We appreciate that. And again, we are looking at all our policies, procedures. How can we perfect them? And that's one of the areas we will take a additional look at to move on that. One quick question did come in. It says, why only enforce on weekends? We're just doing it this weekend for the purpose of the executive order just had taken place. So, but we will do ongoing checks as we continue on the coronavirus pandemic. And hopefully, as was pointed out, hopefully we have most entities in compliance and we won't have to issue tickets. We haven't issued any citations. It's been pretty much complaint driven, but we are going to be more proactive since we have seen the uptick. And again, it's uptick in positive cases. What we want to make sure of is that we stay in phase 4 as much as possible with regards to that. A couple of things. One is wearing the mask. Somebody had emailed in about employees not wearing masks, and they singled out the police department. I have noticed over this past week or so, when I come in, officers are wearing masks where they might not have been doing so a month earlier or something of that nature. So it is we are creatures of habit. I think when people do go into a public setting, they tend to put it on, but then they may forget when they get up from their desk or what have you. But it is still a requirement when you are coming in close contact with others that you wear a face covering when you are in a public space. So I don't know, Chief, either one of you want to weigh in on any of that, but if someone does come to do city service and you feel uncomfortable that has taken place, be sure to send an email to feedback@springfield.il.us with specifics. That'd be appreciated. I think Chief Reyne talked about this. When you do complain about a business, we'll go in, a lot of times they're in compliance. So if you can take a picture, really have some verifiable evidence and send that along with the complaint, that will really help us narrow on the particular incident. But either one of you want to weigh in on the face covering with internal?
I'll start with our guys. I've received just a couple of minor complaints about a face mask. And for the most part, our order is if you're inside of a business, so if you see a crew at a grocery store or something like that, they should have their face covering on. The level of PPE outside of that on an emergency call is up to the company officer. We trust our people, and sometimes that PPE has to vary depending on the information they got. And we also are concerned about our burn rate. We don't want to, for lack of a better word, waste a mask on something that doesn't require it, because our people are able to space apart. It's, they're out dealing with a brush fire or something, smaller, that we don't want to waste them. And it's the same, we had the same issue with our gloves. Our crews were using gloves to decon the rig, to decon the apparatus. And we had to ask them to stop that because we were burning through the gloves at a way faster rate than we normally did. So we got them cheaper food quality, food grade gloves to do that stuff with. So we've had to make adjustments. We have to take care of our PPE. And so when you see crews out, for the most part, if they are not able to socially distance, we ask them to put their mask on. We've curbed all the stuff that we love doing, having people in the firehouse, going to neighborhood block parties, things like that. We've stopped doing all of those things. Our community outreach, and one place that's really hurting us bad is recruitment. Our recruitment efforts are down, and we're going to be announcing very quickly, as the police just has, that we're going to be testing soon. So those are challenges. It's not ideal times. I hope we get out of it soon. I certainly didn't sign up for this, but it's just one of those things,
I'm getting my money's worth.
You go to spot,
or we are getting our money's worth.
Yep. Sometimes you have little spot fires to put out, and this is more than a spot fire, but we'll get through it.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be better on the other side and better prepared for the next one.
And I would just add, our process and our policies have evolved as the pandemic's evolved. Our rules currently are that basically, if you go into a business, like Al said, you should have your mask on. If you go out on a call or a proactive detail where you can maintain 6 feet social distance, you didn't have to have a mask on. Now we've gotten to where if you're going to a call for service where you believe that you're going to just take a report and that you don't think you're going to have an interaction or a close interaction with somebody, you now have to wear one of our surgical masks. But then those calls where we know we're going to go, chances are a disturbance or somebody who's in custody for some of the simple as a retail theft, where we know we're going to have to go hands-on with them. Now they have to wear their N95. So our process has been evolving as the pandemic has been evolving. Again, what I would say is that if the officer's out just on foot patrol walking, he's probably not going to have a mask on. His mask will be readily accessible on his person that he can put on if he gets in close proximity of somebody. As Al said, this has really affected our ability to community outreach. We had to cancel our junior police academy. We had to cancel our teen academy. Now we postponed our citizen police academy till January. It's not ideal. It does affect recruiting. It does affect some of the stuff we're doing. We're still trying to do some things out there as safely as possible by wearing masks, by wearing gloves. But again, it's not ideal, but that's the policy for our folks right now.
Yeah, we're unfortunately coming up on the hour. One quick item. Someone had a question, or I guess they're not getting the Comcast service that they feel they should, especially on internet. And since we're going into the school year, that's really important that we do have internet access as much as possible. So we'll look into that. And that's one of the items. Hopefully we'll put together a educational panel next week for Facebook Live. One quick item with regards to testing. EPA back with a satellite on Wednesday. They will be providing testing out at the Illinois State Fairgrounds, and that will be from, my understanding, from 9 to 5. So we appreciate that. We really appreciate SIU Medicine picking up the vacancy that's at the public health area, and they are providing testing from 9 to 11 and 4 to 7, I believe, every day except for Wednesday. So if you're not able to make it, go out Wednesday to the fairgrounds. Public health the other days from 9 to 11 or 4 to 7. And then, of course, Walgreens by appointment on 9th Street. The other area to point out, go to the website helpingillinoisfamilies.com. That's where you can get assistance with regards to rental assistance or LIHEAP, which is your energy bill. Get assistance that way if needed, or go to our website at springfield.il.us with regards to that. So any final comments you'd like to make? I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate your service. And what a lot of people might not realize, these two derived from Alton, Illinois. They shared the same high school experience together. So we really got some gems of their community to serve us here, and we can't thank you enough for what you've done and what you do for our community and serving us each and every day. So thank you. Any high school stories you want to share real quick? Or we'll save that for next time.
No.
But remember, the main thing is, as we go through this frustrating time, it's important to support one another, respect one another, and we'll get through this together. And what we're trying to strive for each and every day is let's make today better than yesterday and tomorrow better than today. So I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next week, Wednesday at noon for the next Facebook Live.